The dawn of the 20th century was an age of colossal ambition, a time when humanity looked to the oceans not as barriers, but as grand avenues for conquest. It was an era defined by the majestic ocean liner, a testament to industrial might and luxurious fantasy. And at the pinnacle of this golden age, the White Star Line unveiled its crowning achievement, a trio of vessels designed to be the largest, most opulent, and crucially, the safest ships ever to grace the seas. These were the Olympic-class liners, and their names would forever be etched into history, though perhaps not in the way their creators intended. Pacing cue, slow, majestic start, gradually building a sense of unease. The firstborn, the RMS Olympic, launched in 1910, was a marvel. Over 882 feet long, weighing more than 45,000 tons, she was a floating palace of Edwardian elegance, boasting grand staircases, lavish dining saloons, and state-of-the-art engineering. Her maiden voyage in June 1911 was a triumph, a smooth crossing that solidified her reputation as the pride of the British merchant fleet. She was the envy of the world, a symbol of progress, a ship that whispered promises of an unblemished future. Her sister, the Titanic, was still taking shape in the vast Harland Wolff shipyards of Belfast, a mirror image destined for even greater acclaim, already being heralded as unsinkable before her keel was fully immersed. But beneath the veneer of invincibility, the seeds of a darker narrative were being sown. The White Star Line, under the astute but relentless leadership of J. Bruce Ismay and backed by the immense financial power of J.P. Morgan's International Mercantile Marine Company, operated in a fiercely competitive market. Speed, luxury, and reliability were paramount, but so was profit. And sometimes the pursuit of profit can lead down paths obscured by shadow and deceit. Pacing cue, transition to a more urgent, foreboding tone. On September 20, 1911, just 3 months after her glorious debut, the Olympics' flawless record was shattered. As she steamed out of Southampton, passing through the Solent off the Isle of Wight, a disastrous encounter unfolded. Under the command of Captain Edward J. Smith, a seasoned veteran of the White Star Line, the Olympic executed a turning maneuver that brought her perilously close to the British warship HMS Hawke. The Hawke, a protected cruiser, was designed to ram enemy ships, and its bow was specifically reinforced for such an impact. The suction created by the Olympic's massive propellers, combined with the Hawke's course, pulled the smaller warship inexorably towards the liner. The collision was brutal. The Hawke's reinforced bow tore into the Olympic's starboard quarter, just aft of the main mast, ripping a gaping hole in her hull above and below the waterline. Though no lives were lost, the damage was severe. 2 of the Olympic's watertight compartments were breached, and her propeller shaft was twisted, rendering her unable to continue her journey across the Atlantic. She limped back to Southampton, a wounded behemoth, her grand facade marred by the cruel reality of maritime peril. Pacing cue, accelerating narrative, emphasizing the immediate problem and pressure. The immediate aftermath was a scramble. The Olympic, the White Star Line's flagship, was out of commission. Her extensive repairs would take months, a major blow to the company's schedule, and more critically, its finances. Insurance claims were filed, but the process would be lengthy, and the loss of revenue from a vessel of the Olympics' capacity was immense. The cost of repairs, estimated in the hundreds of thousands of pounds sterling, millions in today's money, was staggering. Meanwhile, in Belfast, the Titanic, the Olympics' near-identical sister, was nearing completion. Her maiden voyage was scheduled for April 10, 1912. The pressure to launch on time was immense. Delays would mean further financial penalties, reputational damage, and a lost opportunity in the lucrative transatlantic passenger trade. The Harland Wolff shipyard, already straining to meet deadlines, now faced an unprecedented challenge. Repair one colossal liner while simultaneously finishing another. Pacing cue. Introducing the core conspiracy theory. Building suspense. It is here, in this crucible of misfortune and financial desperation, that one of maritime history's most audacious and enduring conspiracy theories takes root. What if, faced with the monumental cost of repairs and the looming deadline for the Titanic's launch, a dark, unthinkable plan was hatched? a plan to orchestrate a switch to swap the damaged Olympic for the nearly identical Titanic, and then intentionally sink the former, claiming a colossal insurance payout. The theory suggests that the Olympic, heavily insured for a sum reportedly around $10 million, an astronomical figure in 1912, became a liability. The Titanic, on the other hand, was not yet fully insured or insured for a lesser amount, as she had not yet made a successful voyage. The motive, proponents argue, was clear: financial gain on an unimaginable scale. Pacing cue. Detailing the alleged mechanics of the swap, speculative yet precise. How could such a deception be pulled off? The argument goes that the two ships, built from the same blueprints, were almost indistinguishable to the untrained eye. The Olympic, fresh from its collision, was sent back to Harland Wolff. The Titanic, still in its final stages of fitting out, was also at the shipyard. Under the intense bustle and secrecy of the massive Belfast yard, it is theorized that the ships were secretly swapped. Minor differences between the two ships, such as the number of portholes on certain decks or the arrangement of internal features, were either overlooked by the public or hastily altered. Nameplates, builders' plates, and other identifying marks could be exchanged. The most crucial change, however, would be the repainting of their names. The damaged Olympic would be christened Titanic, and the pristine Titanic would become the Olympic. The damaged ship, now masquerading as the brand-new liner, would then embark on its ill-fated maiden voyage, a ticking time bomb designed for disaster. Pacing cue, focusing on the alleged players and the dark implications. The key players in this alleged dissection would have been those with the most to gain and the power to execute such a scheme. J. Bruce Ismay, the chairman of White Star Line, and Lord Peary, the chairman of Harland Wolff, both men with direct lines to the formidable J.P. Morgan. These were men accustomed to wielding immense power, men who operated in an era where industrial titans often begged rules to their will. The conspiracy posits that they, along with a select few trusted individuals, orchestrated this unthinkable act, gambling with human lives for the sake of staggering profit. The plan, if it existed, was not merely to sink a ship, but to sink it in a way that would appear accidental. The unsinkable myth surrounding the Titanic would, ironically, be exploited. The belief that the ship was indestructible would lull passengers and crew into a false sense of security, making them less vigilant, less prepared for the inevitable. The stage would be set for a tragedy of epic proportions, designed not by fate, but by human greed. Pacing cue, building towards the tragic maiden voyage with a sense of dread. The final act of this chilling theory involves the maiden voyage itself. If the ship that departed Southampton on April 10, 1912, was indeed the damaged Olympic disguised as the Titanic, then every aspect of that journey takes on a sinister hue. The alleged haste in setting sail, the decision to push for speed despite ice warnings, the infamous shortage of lifeboats, all these elements, traditionally attributed to negligence or arrogance, suddenly become pieces of a meticulously planned puzzle. Captain Edward Smith, who had commanded the Olympic during its collision with the Hawke, was now at the helm of the Titanic. Was he a willing participant in the deception, or an unwitting pawn in a game far grander and more terrifying than he could imagine? The theory suggests that the intention was not to cause mass casualties, but to evacuate the ship in a controlled manner, perhaps with a nearby rescue vessel awaiting. But the unforgiving nature of the North Atlantic, the sheer speed of the sinking, and the catastrophic lack of lifeboats turned a calculated risk into an unimaginable catastrophe. Pacing cue, a somber, reflective conclusion. As the true RMS Olympic continued to sail for decades after 1912, her career long and distinguished, the ship that bore the name Titanic plunged to the depths of the ocean, taking with it over 1,500 souls. The official narrative speaks of an iceberg, of human error, of a tragic confluence of circumstances. But the whispers of the switch theory persist, a dark undercurrent in the annals of maritime history. There is no definitive, undeniable proof that the Titanic and Olympic were ever swapped. The official records, the immense logistical challenges, and the sheer number of people who would have had to remain silent for decades make the theory seem almost impossible. Yet the questions linger. The financial motive, the timing of the Olympic's damage, the nearly identical nature of the ships, and the enduring allure of a grand conspiracy continue to fuel the debate. What if the ship that sank that cold April night was not the Titanic, but its damaged insured sister? It is a question that for some casts a chilling shadow over one of history's most profound tragedies, suggesting that beneath the waves a far deeper, darker secret may lie buried. The year is 1911. The world watches in awe as White Star Line, a titan of maritime commerce, prepares to launch two of the most magnificent vessels ever conceived, the Olympic and the Titanic. These sister ships, products of Belfast's renowned Harland and Wolff shipyard, were designed to be the undisputed monarchs of the Atlantic, symbols of an era of unprecedented luxury and technological ambition. But even before the Titanic's keel was fully laid, a shadow fell upon its older sibling, the RMS Olympic, a shadow that would, according to one of history's most audacious conspiracy theories, set in motion a chain of events culminating in an unimaginable deception. On September 20, 1911, just months after her triumphant maiden voyage, the Olympic suffered a catastrophic collision with the Royal Navy cruiser HMS Hawke off the Isle of Wight in the Solent. The impact tore a gaping hole in her starboard side, flooding two of her watertight compartments and bending her propeller shaft. Though the Olympic limped back to Southampton, the damage was severe, requiring extensive and costly repairs. This unexpected setback plunged White Star Line into a deep financial predicament. The company had invested heavily in these two colossal liners, and the repair bill, coupled with the loss of revenue from the Olympic's interrupted service, threatened to derail their ambitious plans for transatlantic dominance. The financial pressure was immense. The Olympic, still a new ship, was insured for a substantial sum, but the claim process was complex, potentially lengthy, and fraught with the risk of depreciation due to the severe damage. Crucially, the Titanic, still undergoing fitting out in Belfast, was nearing completion, and its highly anticipated maiden voyage was just around the corner. The delay caused by the Olympic's repairs, which necessitated using the Titanic's dry dock space and even some of her parts, further exacerbated the crisis. It was in this crucible of desperation, some theorists argue, that an audacious, almost unthinkable plan was conceived, an elaborate insurance fraud that would sacrifice one ship for the financial salvation of an empire. The core of this chilling theory posits that the damaged RMS Olympic was secretly swapped with the nearly identical yet still pristine RMS Titanic. The plan was simple in its cunning: sink the damaged ship, now masquerading as the Titanic, to claim a massive insurance payout of $10 million, a sum equivalent to hundreds of millions today. Meanwhile, the truly unsinkable Titanic, now sailing under the Olympic's name, would continue its service, generating revenue and escaping the financial black hole of its sister's repairs. This scheme, it is alleged, was hatched by the most powerful figures connected to White Star Line. At the heart of this alleged conspiracy stood J.P. Morgan, the titan of finance, whose International Mercantile Marine Company IM owned White Star Line. Morgan, a man whose wealth and influence were almost boundless, was reportedly facing significant financial difficulties within his vast empire. Alongside him, according to the theory, was Bruce Ismay, the ambitious chairman and managing director of White Star Line, whose reputation and fortune were inextricably linked to the success of the Olympic-class liners. The perfect stage for this deception was the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, a sprawling complex where both ships had been built and where the damaged Olympic now sat alongside the finishing Titanic, their near-identical forms offering the perfect camouflage for such a switch. The alleged swap itself would have been a monumental undertaking requiring the complicity of hundreds, if not thousands, of shipyard workers, engineers, and crew members. Theorists suggest the switch occurred during the winter months of late 1911 and early 1912, when both ships were docked in Belfast. The most obvious identifiers, the ships' names, would have been relatively easy to change, along with their official hull numbers. But the deception went deeper. Subtle differences between the two vessels, such as the number of portholes on their forward B deck, would have needed to be altered on the Olympic to match the Titanic's specifications. Internal fittings, decor, and even minor structural elements would have been swapped or modified to complete the illusion, creating a flawless masquerade designed to fool not just the public, but even some of the crew. The motive for proponents of this theory was clear and compelling: pure financial gain. The $10 million insurance policy on the Titanic was a staggering sum, a lifeline for a company teetering on the brink. By sinking the damaged Olympic, disguised as the Titanic, the conspirators could not only claim this colossal payout, but also avoid the immense costs of repairing the Olympic and the further revenue losses from its extended downtime. It was a cold, calculated gamble, a high-stakes game of corporate survival where human lives were, allegedly, deemed an acceptable casualty in the pursuit of profit. The unsinkable myth, heavily promoted by White Star Line, would, in this twisted narrative, become a macabre irony, a psychological shield to reassure passengers embarking on a journey to a preordained doom. As the Titanic, allegedly the Olympic, prepared for its maiden voyage from Southampton on April 10, 1912, the theory posits that the stage was set for the ultimate betrayal. Key individuals, including J.P. Morgan himself, who had a booking on the fateful voyage, conspicuously cancelled their trips at the last minute, citing illness or other convenient excuses. Valuable artifacts, allegedly including priceless paintings and jewels, were supposedly removed from the ship before its departure, safeguarding them from the impending disaster. Even some of the crew, particularly senior officers, were allegedly reassigned or coerced into silence, becoming unwitting or unwilling participants in the grand deception. The meticulous planning, the layers of secrecy, all pointed to a carefully orchestrated event, not a tragic accident. The journey began with all the pomp and grandeur befitting the world's largest liner. Yet, beneath the veneer of luxury and excitement, a darker current ran. The alleged conspirators, knowing the true identity of the ship and its intended fate, would have carefully orchestrated events leading to the collision. The speed at which the Titanic traversed the icy North Atlantic, the alleged disregard for multiple ice warnings, the positioning of the ship in a known iceberg field, all, for theorists, were not acts of negligence, but deliberate actions designed to ensure the ship met its tragic end. The collision with the iceberg on the night of April 14, 1912, was not a random twist of fate, but the culmination of a meticulously planned scheme. The horrifying loss of life, over 1,500 souls perishing in the frigid waters, became the tragic consequence of this unprecedented act of corporate greed. While the world mourned the sinking of the unsinkable Titanic, the real Titanic, allegedly disguised as the Olympic, continued its service for another quarter-century. A ghost ship sailing under a false identity, its true lineage buried beneath the waves, and a mountain of insurance claims. This, for proponents of the theory, is the ultimate proof, the chilling aftermath that fuels the enduring legend of the Titanic switch. The what-if of the Titanic insurance scam theory continues to captivate and disturb. It paints a picture of a world where power, money, and desperation can drive men to unimaginable lengths, twisting history's most iconic maritime disaster into a cold, calculated act of corporate espionage and fraud. It forces us to question official narratives, to look beyond the headlines, and to ponder the chilling possibility that one of the greatest tragedies of the 20th century was in fact an elaborately staged deception, a fabrication of disaster for profit. The year is 1912. The grandest ship ever built, the RMS Titanic, set sail from Southampton only to meet its catastrophic end in the icy North Atlantic. A tragedy of epic proportions, an engineering marvel brought low by a simple iceberg. Or was it? For over a century, a persistent whisper has echoed through the annals of history, a tantalizing counter-narrative suggesting that the Titanic, the ship we believe sank, was not the Titanic at all. This is the heart of the insurance scam theory, a meticulously planned deception, a switch of colossal proportions, designed to sink an already damaged vessel and claim a hefty $10 million insurance payout. But what evidence do proponents cite for such an audacious claim? What anomalies, alibis, and allegations fuel this enduring mystery? The most sensational claim revolves around a supposed ship swap. The theory posits that the White Star Line, facing financial ruin from the damaged RMS Olympic, Titanic's identical sister ship, which had suffered a severe collision with HMS Hawke in September 1911, secretly switched the two vessels. The Olympic, already compromised, was allegedly refitted with the Titanic's name and details, then deliberately sent to its doom. Proponents point to subtle architectural differences as their smoking gun. They argue that photographs of the Titanic's B deck, particularly the promenade, show discrepancies. Some assert that the number of portholes on certain decks varied between the two ships, and that the ship that sank, when examined through recovered wreckage photographs, exhibited the Olympic's porthole configuration, not the Titanic's. They speak of hull plates, rivets, and even minor cosmetic damage from the Olympic's earlier collision that might have been hastily concealed, but still identifiable to a keen eye. The sheer audacity of this proposition is staggering. Thousands of shipyard workers, engineers, crew, and even passengers would have to be either complicit or incredibly unobservant. Yet historical records and expert analysis paint a very different picture. Detailed builders' plans, meticulously preserved by Harland and Wolff, show the precise specifications for both the Olympic and the Titanic. These blueprints clearly delineate the Titanic's unique features, such as the enclosed private promenade on B deck for its lavish suites, a design innovation not present on the Olympic's initial launch. Numerous photographs, taken throughout the construction and fitting out phases of both vessels, provide an overwhelming visual chronology. These images consistently show the Titanic as built, with its distinctive design elements, from its keel laying in March 1909 to its maiden voyage in April 1912. To suggest a switch would mean fabricating an entire photographic history and altering thousands of official documents. Furthermore, the rigorous inspection processes by Lloyd's of London surveyors and the British Board of Trade, whose representatives were present throughout construction and before departure, would have made such a large-scale deception virtually impossible. Any lingering damage from the Olympic's collision would have been a glaring red flag, rendering the ship uninsurable and unseaworthy. The porthole claims, often cited, frequently stem from misinterpretations of different deck levels or photographic angles, easily debunked by comparing comprehensive sets of images and blueprints. The evidence overwhelmingly supports the fact that the Titanic, as designed and built, was indeed the ship that sailed and tragically sank. The narrative shifts from structural anomalies to humor error, or perhaps deliberate omission. Another cornerstone of the scam theory is the infamous case of the missing binoculars. David Blair, the Titanic's second officer, was reassigned at the last minute before the maiden voyage, a common occurrence as final crew lists were adjusted. In his haste, Blair allegedly took the crow's nest locker key, and with it the binoculars, which remained locked away. Lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee testified that they had no binoculars, hindering their ability to spot the approaching iceberg. Proponents argue this was no accident, but a calculated move to ensure the iceberg remained unseen until it was too late, clearing the path for the doomed Olympic to sink. However, the reality of maritime practices in 1912 casts a different light on this seemingly crucial detail. While binoculars would certainly have been helpful, their absence was not by itself a death sentence for the ship. Lookouts primarily relied on their naked eyes, which were considered more effective for detecting faint objects against the horizon at night, especially in conditions where light distortion could occur. Binoculars were typically used for identifying objects star after star they had been sighted, not for initial long-range scanning. The conditions on that fateful night, a moonless sky, an eerily calm sea, and a black iceberg that reflected no light, made detection incredibly difficult, even with the keenest eyesight. Fleet himself testified that even with binoculars, it was highly improbable they would have spotted the iceberg in time to avert the collision, given the ship's speed and the unique nature of the hazard. Blair's reassignment, while unfortunate for the crew, was a routine administrative decision, not an act of sabotage. There is no historical evidence to link his departure or the missing binoculars to any deliberate plot to ensure the ship's demise. The final piece of the conspiratorial puzzle concerns the powerful figures who were conspicuously absent from the Titanic's maiden voyage. J.P. Morgan, the titan of finance, who owned the International Mercantile Marine, the parent company of White Star Line, was scheduled to be on board, but cancelled at the 11th hour, citing illness. He was not alone. Several other prominent individuals, including Henry Clay Frick and Milton Hershey, also cancelled their trips. Conspiracy theorists highlight that many of these individuals were outspoken critics of the proposed Federal Reserve, an institution that would later be established in 1913. The theory suggests Morgan, knowing the ship was doomed, orchestrated their removal, effectively eliminating powerful opposition to his financial schemes. Yet, once again, the historical record offers a more mundane, albeit less dramatic, explanation. J.P. Morgan was genuinely ill at the time, a fact corroborated by his physician and contemporary reports. He had a history of poor health and was prone to last-minute cancellations. His private suite on the Titanic, incidentally, was never actually booked. As for the other cancellations, it was not unusual for passenger lists to fluctuate significantly before a major voyage. People canceled for a myriad of reasons: business emergencies, family matters, or other illnesses. To retrospectively connect these cancellations to a nascent debate about central banking, which would not even materialize into the Federal Reserve for another year, requires a significant leap of faith, devoid of any direct evidence. Furthermore, the fundamental question remains: why would J.P. Morgan, a man who built an empire, willingly sink his own ship, incur immense financial loss, and risk his reputation on such a grotesque scheme, all to eliminate a few potential critics? The insurance payout, while substantial, would hardly compensate for the loss of a flagship vessel and the catastrophic blow to his company's prestige and market value. The scale of the human conspiracy required to execute such a plot, involving hundreds, if not thousands of individuals, would be unprecedented and ultimately impossible to keep secret. The allure of a hidden truth, a meticulously planned dissection, often overshadows the stark simplicity of an accident. The human mind, wired to seek patterns and meaning, sometimes finds it easier to believe in a grand conspiracy than in the random cruelty of fate. While the insurance scam theory offers a sensational narrative, it ultimately crumbles under the weight of historical scrutiny, expert analysis, and the sheer logistical impossibility of its execution. The overwhelming evidence, from detailed blueprints and photographic records to eyewitness testimonies and physical wreckage, points to a tragic yet accidental demise. The Titanic, the grandest ship of its age, was indeed the one that sailed, and it was indeed the one that sank, a victim not of elaborate fraud, but of human hubris, technological overconfidence, and an unseen iceberg in the vast, unforgiving ocean. Sometimes the most devastating truth is also the most straightforward. The year is 1912. The industrial age hums with a relentless ambition, and at its zenith stands the RMS Titanic star, a marvel of engineering, a floating palace deemed unsinkable. Her maiden voyage, scheduled for April 10th from Southampton to New York, is a testament to human ingenuity and the boundless confidence of an era. But what if this iconic journey, this symbol of an age, was never truly meant to end in tragedy? What if the catastrophic sinking of the Titanic star was in fact a meticulously orchestrated deception, a $10 million insurance fraud designed to eliminate an aging, damaged sister ship, the Olympic star, Lynton King Ransing Imagine a world where the meticulously planned scheme unfolds without a hitch. The Olympic star, Midchiat Stansing 2 and Midjin, sails of the Titanic star, sails across the Atlantic. There is no iceberg, no desperate calls for help from the North Atlantic's icy grip, no panicked rush for lifeboats, no heart-wrenching goodbyes on the slanting deck. Instead, the ship, now bearing the legendary name, glides majestically into New York Harbor, perhaps a day or two behind schedule, a triumphant symbol of White Star Line's dominance. The world breathes a collective sigh of relief, marveling at the sheer resilience of the vessel. The immediate ripple effects would be profound. There would be no frantic inquiries into lifeboat capacity, no global outcry demanding stricter maritime safety regulations. The International Ice Patrol, established in the wake of the Titanic star disaster, would likely never have been conceived, leaving shipping lanes vulnerable to unseen threats for decades longer. The very concept of unsinkable would persist, dangerously, in the public consciousness, delaying vital safety advancements that ultimately saved countless lives in subsequent maritime incidents. Other ships, perhaps the Empress of Ireland star in 1914 or the Lusitania star in 1915, might have faced their own fates with even less preparedness, their passenger lists potentially much longer. The financial motive, the $10 million insurance payout, would have been a colossal windfall for the International Mercantile Marine Company, IMMC, the shipping conglomerate headed by the enigmatic J.P. Morgan. With the Olympic star secretly scrapped or refitted under a new name, the IMMC would have escaped a costly repair bill and gained a substantial profit, strengthening their financial position against rivals like Cunard. Bruce Ismay, chairman of White Star Line, would have continued his career untainted by the coward label that haunted him in our reality. He would have been seen as a shrewd businessman, not a man who abandoned his ship. Consider the lives of those who perished in our timeline, but would have been saved in this alternate reality. John Jacob Astor IV, the wealthiest man aboard, would have continued his real estate empire, his wife Madeline, giving birth to their son Vincent without the shadow of his father's tragic death. Benjamin Guggenheim, the mining magnate, would have continued his opulent lifestyle, his reputation as a playboy undiminished. Isidor Straus, co-owner of Macy's department store, and his wife Ida, known for their devotion, would have returned home to their family, their philanthropic legacy continuing to grow. Their absence from the tragedy would mean the world would never know the poignant tales of their final moments, stories that have inspired generations. Without the Titanic star sinking, the ship itself would have continued its service, perhaps for decades a workhorse of the transatlantic route. It might have seen service in the Great War, transporting troops or supplies, or endured until the Great Depression, eventually succumbing to the economic pressures that plagued shipping lines in the 1930s. The White Star Line, without the immense financial and reputational blow, might have maintained a stronger independent presence, potentially delaying or even preventing its eventual merger with Cunard to form Cunard White Star Line. The Star Carpathia Star, the ship that famously rescued the ship that famously survivors, would have remained a footnote in maritime history, her heroic role never having materialized. The cultural impact of a non-sinking Titanic star is perhaps the most difficult to fully grasp. The ship, in our reality, became a global legend, a symbol of human hubris, the stark contrast between social classes, and the enduring power of love and sacrifice in the face of insurmountable odds. Without the tragedy, there would be no iconic films, no best-selling books, no haunting songs, no dramatic documentaries. The Titanic star would simply be another grand liner, admired for its size and luxury, but lacking the profound emotional resonance that has captivated the world for over a century. Our collective consciousness would be missing a powerful, universally understood narrative of human vulnerability and the unforgiving nature of the seas. Yet, despite the undeniable facts of the Titanic star's sinking, despite the wreckage resting 2.5 miles beneath the ocean's surface, the insurance scam theory persists. It is a testament to the human fascination with untold stories, with the idea that behind every great tragedy lies a hidden truth, a Machiavellian plot orchestrated by powerful figures. The theory often points to the Olympic star's earlier collision with HMS Hawke in 1911, an incident that left her severely damaged and facing lengthy uninsured repairs. The argument posits that White Star Line, under IMMC, swapped the Olympic star for the Titanic star, Eustace, sent the damaged ship to an intentional accident to collect the insurance, and scrapped the Titanic star, now disguised as the Olympic star, quietly. Proponents of the theory scrutinize every photograph, every manifest, every minor discrepancy in the ship's construction. They highlight alleged differences in porthole numbers, the names on the lifeboats, even the quality of the steel used. They point to the mysterious last-minute cancellations of several prominent figures, including J.P. Morgan himself, as evidence of foreknowledge. The theory becomes a puzzle, a compelling narrative that offers an explanation, however outlandish, for an event that still beggars belief. How could the unsinkable ship, the pinnacle of modern engineering, vanish in its maiden voyage? The enduring power of the Titanic star conspiracy theory speaks to a deeper psychological need. In the face of random, devastating tragedy, the human mind often seeks order, a logical explanation, even if it's a sinister one. The idea of a deliberate act, a calculated fraud, provides a sense of control, a narrative that explains the inexplicable. It feeds a natural distrust of authority and powerful elites, suggesting that those at the top are capable of the darkest deceptions for financial gain. The sheer scale of the Titanic star disaster, the loss of over 1,500 lives, makes the search for a deeper, perhaps more scandalous, truth all the more compelling. Ultimately, whether the Titanic star sank due to an act of God, human error, or a nefarious plot, its legacy is undeniable. The real tragedy catalyzed monumental changes in maritime safety, forever altering how we travel the seas. But the persistent whispers of a grand deception, the what-if of the insurance scam, ensures that the Titanic star continues to captivate. It reminds us that sometimes the most enduring stories are not just about what happened, but about what we imagine might have happened, tapping into our deepest fears and our eternal fascination with the hidden workings of the world. The myth of the Titanic star transcends its historical reality, living on not just as a symbol of tragedy, but as a fertile ground for the imagination, a testament to the enduring power of conspiracy in the face of an epic, heartbreaking loss.